he has led teams that identify and overcome challenges to promote innovation at scale. Consulting across many industries, including finance, technology, healthcare, biotech, and pharmaceutical, he and his team help drive sustainable change while allowing smooth business processes. Please join me in welcoming Vice President of Client Experience at the Neuroleadership Institute, Drew Sumter. Great to have you here today, Drew.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shelby. Happy to be here. Welcome, everyone.
Thanks. Our second guest for today oversees NLI product and advisory functions. She has extensive experience in management and consulting across a diverse array of industries. She's the author of NLI's seminal research on organizational growth mindset and brain-friendly leadership models. Her current specialty is partnering with executives on transformational initiatives, specifically global leadership transformations and large-scale culture change. Please join me in welcoming the Vice President of Product and Advisory, Rachel Cardero. Thanks for being here today, Rachel.
Hi, Shelby. Hi, all. It's a big pleasure.
And our moderator for today leads the research team at the Neuroleadership Institute, where she focuses on translating cognitive and social neuroscience into actionable solutions for organizations, as well as helps to communicate relevant research in an accessible manner for the public. Previously, she was a professor at Dominican College and New York University and a researcher at the Nathan Klein Institute. She holds a bachelor's degree from Brown University and a PhD in neuroscience from the New York University. A warm welcome to the Senior Director of Research at NLI, Dr. Emma Saro. Thanks for being here today, Emma, as always, and I'm passing it over to you.
Thanks, Shelby. Hello, I'm so excited to be here with you two. I don't think we've ever done an episode, just the three of us, so it's going to be fun. So for everyone that's here, it's going to be a bit of a shift from our recent episodes. Today, we're going to get pretty specific about the work we do with our partners, how we incorporate the science of learning and memory and habit formation to help companies reach their objectives or solve any of the challenges that they're facing. We have our two most expert individuals who work closely on this work with our partners, and they're going to give us a look inside into what we call our thinking partnerships. So here, what we're talking about is not just buying a single solution or product off the shelf. So much more than that. It's a way to directly address your company's challenge through what some think of as a journey through a few of our solutions that are designed specifically to the needs of our partners. So we call these thinking partnerships because it really stems from both the collaboration or the collaborative journey that we take with our clients, but also because we integrate our understanding of neuroscience. So the ways to design experiences that result in the deepest learning and the strongest memories, and the ways that will best manage our partners' cognitive capacity. So for anyone who follows us often, this is where we're talking about our AGES model and our FACT models. Now we'll get into a bit more of the details about each of these models and how they're used as lenses or as guiding lights as we design these programs. But I just want to dive right in, and I'm going to pull Rachel in for a bit to kind of explain to us a bit of what these partnerships look like, but actually really what do you see our partners facing right now, and how are we working with them?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And Drew and I have been partners in crime for almost a decade at this point, doing this type of work, us, but our teams together. And it's been interesting to see how our clients and our trusted partners are approaching this work now and how that's evolved over the last decade plus, right? I think if I could say one thing about how folks are trying to either maximize their L&D efforts, really bring that custom touch to how they're helping people acquire new skills or see talent management differently, is that they are constantly struggling with the demands of changing priorities, employee burnout, and a sense of change fatigue. And so, we have a lot of folks come to us and say, we know this is absolutely necessary. We need to make this change. We need to build these skills. We want to adapt this process. And there's no bandwidth anywhere to do this work. And I know, Emma, and other, like, we did research on organizational behavior change, and we got lots of really great data that is surprising, but not surprising, like 70, I think, percent of people saying that their change efforts didn't achieve desired results. 65% of people saying that they didn't think that their organization was more effective after whatever the change was. And so a lot of the way that we partner is meant to directly address some of those missteps or some of those friction points. So no matter what we do, I'm always telling people at NLI, we're obsessed about habits. You know, what are the behaviors we're going to target? How are we going to actually help people shift specific behaviors? Not just understand, which we want them to do, not just, say the right things, but really this true alignment of what is important, what are those small behaviors, and then what are the environmental factors we can help you with, the systems, the processes, the talent management steps that create this whole ecosystem for change. And so our teams spend a lot of time helping people really get clear on their goals. And we do that with a lot of design thinking principles, a lot of brain-based principles around co-creation, where we're meeting week to week, we're live editing in documents, we're getting the best from our clients, helping them define their goals, and then getting really like laser focused on those behaviors so that they can become sustainably embedded in the organization. And it's a fun journey. One of the things I think we're pretty proud of is everybody walks away learning a little bit of science as they partner with us. And that's always a treat.
No, that's great. And I love that we start with the science right away, and we even bring that into like how we actually hold each of the meetings and what we bring to each of the meetings. We explain the science as we're talking about why we're adding in each of the steps. So even as you're describing this, and as we were kind of planning this session a bit, we were thinking about talking about a typical or maybe a customized pathway. But is there even such a thing as a typical pathway, right? And like, what if, for instance, we have a partner come to us and say they want to just improve the inclusive behaviors of their leaders? I mean, is it the same for every single client, or what would you say to that?
Yeah. And like for us at NLI, when we're talking about a learning pathway, we often get a question from our clients and our partners. Should we build a program and go really deep on a certain set of skills? And, should we put people in a room for 2 weeks and they're just, going through, building their encyclopedic knowledge on this topic? And that's like, for a lot of us, it's just not a fit for how we're supposed to manage our priorities, for how we're asked to be delivering in our organizations. And so our learning pathways are an attempt to help people balance the pressures of work, the demands of work, with also their learning and development needs. And so with a learning pathway, what NLI does is that we help you identify those critical skills or behaviors. We help you string them together in a coherent experience that can even be micro learning, right? It can be a tiny little 5 minute a week learning burst or a learning snack. But because we use the science of learning and memory and linguistics, neurolinguistics, everything's woven in there, we can help people really string together those skills in a really meaningful way. And so when we're thinking about pathways, I don't know if there's just a single pathway. I do think that there are some typical features of a pathway. And I'm curious also about what Drew and his team have trained millions of learners through our work, especially our big scalable work. But I think like it's always great messaging that is a great feature of a good pathway. And I would say probably starting with the skill that creates the most openness for people, or that really will set them up for success as they go through that journey of either multiple skills or multiple learning solutions. And Drew, anything you'd add to what I'm mentioning?
Absolutely. And thank you, Rachel. I love hearing about the custom work. I like taking part in the custom work and really building the right, proper approach for all of our clients here at NLI. one of the things, and I'm going to take this just in a different direction before coming back to the pathway, but one of the things you mentioned is change fatigue. And I'm just curious, we have 185 participants. How many of you have been experiencing change fatigue? Drop it in the chat because it's real. I speak with clients every single week who talk about change fatigue and what we can do to really combat that. And basically analyze approach is we look at successful organizational change around deeply rooted change management. And that's done through understanding the neuroscience, number one, right? But human psychology of how people respond to change.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're looking at effective change management, we must always consider the brain's natural resistance to change because it's due to perceived threats that change poses due to the uncertainty and the unpredictability of the events that can come. And this consistently blends into any sort of training or learning initiative, right? Our brains are wired to always prefer stability as well as predictability. These conditions require much less cognitive effort and they're perceived as safe, right? So when change occurs, it really disrupts our brain's expected patterns, our expected routines. Our amygdala, which is right here, right above our ears, is a region associated with processing threat, and it processes fear. So the activation of the threat really triggers this response, which is known as fight, flight, or freeze, right? And this leads to increased stress, anxiety, and resistance. And we've evolved as human beings where this has been natural to us and it's a way we've survived, but this blends into the workplace altogether. And when we think about how to navigate this, when we partner with our clients, we want to emphasize the importance of framing change in a way that minimizes threat and maximizes the feelings of reward. Many of you might be familiar with the SCARF model, which is one of our core models here, threat and reward. But we really want to help organizations leverage our science and programs to change for the better over time. And much of that through the pathway approach really involves clear communications around the reasons for change, how these things are implemented, the most importantly, the benefits, what are people going to get out of this? And we want to do our best to reduce uncertainty as well as increase buy-in. And we're seeing in a lot of instances this change management, this change fatigue. Ever since COVID, a lot of things have been thrown on us. A lot of things have been put forward in terms of learning virtually and new ways to do this. And hey, look how easy it is to do this virtually. We don't need everyone in a room. So let's just give more and more and more, right? So when we're working with our clients, we want to be very succinct and we want to make sure that we're very careful on how we roll these types of initiatives out. Going back, and sorry to derail us there and go off kind of on a tangent, but back to what Rachel was referring to, in terms of a typical pathway, normally what we aim for is a very structured multi-phase approach that equips leaders to be more effective. The pathways generally consist of key stages, similar to what Rachel was referring to. We look at assessment and diagnosis, right? Most importantly, this is all done at the upfront. Let's take into account current organizational culture. Let's look at existing leadership practices, diversity metrics, employee engagement scores, right? So many times our clients come to us, they might share surveys or focus group results, executive interviews, whatever it might be, to really help us understand existing attitudes, behaviors, as well as structures. And then based on the assessment and what we see here, we then can help support and diagnose key areas where changes are needed to maybe enhance inclusivity, to develop or optimize leadership effectiveness, and to really build out strong organizational culture. So we assess, then we strategize, we develop, we plan, we set objectives. And this is one of the main things that when we're looking at a pathway approach, we're looking multifaceted down the line, not always just we're going to solve an issue in 2 days. Instead, this is going to be like, let's look at what this can look like over months. Let's look at what this can look like over years, right? And we really want to use the insights from the assessment to set clear and very measurable objectives for what we're looking to achieve. From there, it's developing strategies that outline the initiative, the programs, defining the scope of recommended leadership development modules or any changes to policy. And then we land on where we really want to build this out in terms of tailored and programmatic build, right? So if you look at something like we have a client who wants to develop a leadership program that can enhance decision making, boost emotional intelligence, and provide core techniques and core skills to lead remote and diverse teams effectively. What we would do is then we would build out and we'd look at analyze core content, core IP, and put together a program that can best support that. So in this case, maybe it's looking at something like Decide, in which we can learn and discuss and normalize unconscious bias, and then build that into the next part of the pathway, which is inclusion, which is developing smarter, more inclusive, more effective teams. So using the decision-making element to promote psychological safety, to understand bias, and create a coherent whole in terms of how we want to interact with each other. And then from there, it's building out a cadence of implementation. And through that implementation, then you're looking at start dates, you're looking at end dates, you're looking at consistent evaluation, continuous improvement, feedback loops, sometimes priorities shift, right? So we want to make sure that we're agile, we're flexible in the way that we roll these out, in the way that we position, in the way we stack these up against competing priorities and whatnot. And then we sustain, right? So one of the most important core parts about the pathway learning is the sustainment of the habits that Rachel alluded to previously. Habits over time, the sustainment, and how they all work together with synergy to make sure that when you come out through the end of a pathway of maybe it's the Decide program and the Include program, there's consistent, coherent, and everything builds amongst each other and builds on top of it, so that the participants are gaining value and the organization's priorities are being met. And we typically see that this type of approach not only can help build a stronger leadership culture, but if we're agile and we're flexible enough, it can also kind of evolve to meet the needs of a consistently changing and flexible workforce.
Yeah. And what I love about what you're saying is, and I think we do this very intentionally at NLI. So anytime that we are helping an organization roll out learning, anytime that we're helping you put together a learning pathway to really maximize behavior change or enable or accelerate your transformation, we're looking at a lot of science in the learning itself. You know, how do people need to learn? How can they really remember this? How can they apply these skills, habits, and behaviors? And then we're also looking at what the container, the mechanism of bringing it to the organization, also with kind of equal attention to how do people learn, how do people understand change. And I think it is the balance of those two things, because we get a lot of folks asking us, you know, what's the threshold for the, like, how can I do this? What's the silver bullet? What's the way everybody else does this so that I can get the same results? And you actually have to do both of those things. And so, you know, a lot of our gold standard solutions where that's been tried and like it's true and tested, that's figured out and you can deploy really quickly. But we're always taking that careful effort to figure out, what do people need? How can they remember more? And I see your team's getting shout outs from some folks in the chat, which I love to see. Like, if you've had a great experience with us, we want to hear it. And also some folks loving some of those gold standard solutions as well: Decide, Connect, Grow, that really help enable behavior change. But I saw a question from Anne about, you know, there's often multiple change efforts. You know, how do you deal with that? What type of research have you seen? And I think a lot of it comes down to what Drew was mentioning about that mechanism for delivering the learning, or the learning pathways. You know, if you are not taking into account how people process information, how they stay motivated, the mental shortcuts they take, then they all are just separate things, right? It's like a shopping cart filled with just a random assortment of items. But just a little bit of care, some coherence across your learning, or like clear messaging around why, can help bring a lot of sense to what people are trying to do.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of references back to things like our models, like FACT and AGES. We think about them throughout the whole process. So thinking about the container you're putting everything in is everything that you're working on, whether it's all of our solutions, as well as everything that they already have in their organization, the language they use, all of their systems and processes, is there coherence across all of these? And so that's some of the data that we take in is, we want to make sure the language makes sense and is easy, it's fluent with everything that they're already taking in, so they don't have to use any extra cognitive capacity to try to understand it. Is the language fluent? Is there coherence across the systems and what we're introducing into the organization? So that's at the front end, and it's also throughout the whole process. And so that helps to reduce that change threat that we're thinking about. And so FACT comes in throughout the whole process. And then the AGES model comes in as we're designing. So what is the experience like? So are we asking them to, only use their limited amount of attention as they're going through some of our programs? And does that change depending on the employee that we're actually working with? So do you see often with large organizations, depending on what set of employees are seeing this change, that you have to change the program a bit? So are you using micro learnings, or are you using, sessions, live sessions, depending on whether you're working with middle managers or, frontline employees? And how do you design that to make sure you're getting the same information across and the same language across?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a big question that I think comes up, a big decision point whenever we're doing this work, where we have to balance the amount of learning, the quantity of learning, the density of information that's in a program with its overall efficacy. And that sounds pretty straightforward. Like, yes, we want it to be, we want the outcomes, we want it to do what we want it to do, we want to see the behavior change. But it is hard sometimes, as you're planning your L&D efforts, a training sprint, a learning pathway, to say, I'm actually going to focus on less here. I'm going to focus on a lot less, and I'm going to make sure that we're just honing in on the things that we really want to see. And so as you're thinking about that, you can do that from a content perspective, but I think, as you're pointing out, like modality wise, same thing, right? We're really focusing on, okay, if I need somebody to learn this, maybe it is a 5-minute video a week. And what they actually need is more social context for how to implement this skill. And so let's do a big social campaign with lighter learning and more of those social learning elements in order to balance things out. Or, given where people are, we want to be highly asynchronous with capstone learning events. And for us, we use our habit activation platform and all of our beautiful digital learning experiences. I think there's like a real effort to weigh the pros and the cons and not get stuck in what we think is right, but actually figure out what's going to be easiest and really meet people where they are, given their cognitive capacity limits, the change fatigue that they're experiencing, and what they understand to be kind of true and right in the organization.
Yeah. So what you're saying is one size doesn't fit all within an organization and across organizations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have multiple modalities, and I don't know, Drew, from your experience, what are you seeing in organizations now? What kinds of modalities that we work in are, most popular, people are excited by, get the greatest change, buy-in?
So it's a good question. I think Rachel used the term, was it magic bullet or silver bullet?
Silver bullet, I think.
Silver bullet, yeah. So there's never really any true silver bullet to any of this, right? Like I have found for doing this for the past 10 years that every organization is different, right? Every organization is going to have different needs. We need to meet those needs, and we need to meet the needs of the participants and find them where they're at, right? So uh given the primary shift to online, we have digital programs. So the benefits of that is a lot of these can be self-paced, so participants can learn when it makes most sense for them. It's easier to fit into their busy schedule, right? As opposed to sending someone out for 3 hours or flying them around the country to sit in a room with their colleagues, right? So we can now look at opportunities where this is all digital. There's interactive content. Engaging videos are much more common. Engagement tools like quizzes, AI generated scenarios. Like we are starting to see AI disrupt everything, in which case there's chatbots, there's coach bots. You can interact with a machine the way we used to interact with humans, which is a great just-in-time tool for today's busy manager who might need tips or direction on having a difficult conversation, right? In terms with the digital, there's also forums where there's community interaction, peer-to-peer networks to enhance that social learning, in terms of the habit activation platforms we're seeing, because this is really due to drive engagement. One of the potential hurdles, though, with the digital, and this is different across multiple industries, but tech can present a hurdle. And self-paced can present a hurdle as well, just given priorities and truth be told, the self-discipline of some of the participants, right? And this goes back to setting the initiative up for success, right? You need to create the strong with them in order, that's what's in it for me, in order to get people in there and interacting with the digital content on their own, because there's little oversight. Now, conversely, we also have live programs. Now, this is tried and true. We've had live programs for decades. This in NLI's world, right? We're looking at an other world, which I'm sure every one of these 100+ audience members has probably been in at one point or the other, but we're looking at real-time interaction in which a facilitator can get immediate engagement between the instructors, the peers, and really help understand and embed new habits through real-time exercises with each other. So live programs doesn't necessarily need to be sitting in a room. It can now be done virtually. It can be done over Zoom. It could be done very similar to what we're doing right here, right? There's a lot of flexibility when you're looking at doing this through Zoom in terms of a virtual live program modality. There's the convenience of online access, and participants can join globally from anywhere possible. So it really leads to a more inclusive learning situation, right? Because you can bring in multiple people from all over the place and everyone can experience the same exact thing. But again, the downsides you're going to have in terms of the live programs is scheduling conflicts. Sometimes there's tech dependencies. Maybe the internet connection's bad. You might be traveling, might be dialing in from an airport, so there could be disruptions there. And there's always distractions that can impact the level of engagement. My personal favorite, and normally what we'd recommend, given time, given budget, is some sort of blended learning pathway in which you've got the best of both worlds. So you've got the self-paced component with live online or in-person sessions to give a more comprehensive type of learning experience. So this helps with the reinforcement of learning, so people can get small bite-sized chunks just in time from their laptop and then discuss them in a group with maybe a facilitator or a group of like-minded colleagues here. And we've actually seen more impact in the habit formation when you have that opportunity. But when it comes down to if you're a practitioner and you're one of the program managers, I mean, the levels of coordination are much more complex when you're looking at this blended style. But we have seen very good uptick and very good engagement levels when we do a bit of both there.
Yeah. And the way that we help ourselves at NLI, so just to pull back the curtain a little bit for you all, change fatigue and decision fatigue, the same thing that our learners suffer from, we do as well. The ones that are planning the learning and our pathways and these big training initiatives. For NLI, what we've done is, as Drew mentioned, all those beautiful modalities are ways of delivering learning. We have, again, these gold standard combinations of different learning assets or events that sit in our toolbox, so to speak. And those are our preferred modalities. And so we know if you needed to be a little more social, we've already done the work ahead of time to think about what are those gold standard modalities and what you need for your specific learner audience or segment. We got a great question from Daisy around like, how can we, what are the best intake questions for participants or for learners? How can we best learn from them? For us, a lot of it has to do with keeping the brain in mind. And so my favorite construct, at least, is to ask about how do people take in information, their cognitive capacity. So are they overwhelmed? Are they bombarded with tons of new information? Will they understand it? Is there an easy way to link it to their current priorities? I also like to look at motivation. So how easily will they connect with the material or the change that you're trying to get them engaged with? And then we also look at their predisposition for certain cognitive biases or mental shortcuts. Are these folks that might be risk averse? Are these folks that just want to do what's tried and true or for them, right? So it might not be the best way, but my gut tells me, we should do this way because this is what I've experienced in the past. And so that mix of looking at somebody's cognitive capacity, their motivation, and their bias, you can actually see, okay, they're overwhelmed, they need light information, they're not motivated enough, right? So let's make it more social. And their predisposition is to be more risk averse. That might be their like bias profile, if you will. And so let's make sure our messaging and the coherence really helps answer those questions around risk aversion. And so in both ways, those can be your intake questions. You can get a sense of their experience and their needs as learners. And then as we do at NLI, we have our toolbox of these gold standard modalities and how we package learning. And so we can easily say, well, you need this one. And now let's take that modality or that approach to learning. Let's customize it. Maybe you want a little more of this. Maybe you want a little less of this. And then we apply that content next.
Thanks, Rachel. And I just want to hop in. Brenda Harrington asked a really good question. How important is the use of e-learning platforms for engagement? So it might be a trick question, but I'm going to take a quick crack at this because e-learning is phenomenal. If anyone's been through e-learning, it's a great way to get synthesized information, synthesized techniques, synthesized skills over to someone in a relatively quickly digital format, right? What makes it really strong and what we found is, to Rachel's point, that social element, right? So it's not critical. E-learning platform is not critical to behavior change or to skill building. It absolutely is not. It's a method to get there, right? In terms of a digital modality. But what makes it really, really strong is when you build in that social accountability, that social interaction. And what we here at NLI have found very helpful is to, if we're going through an e-learning module, to have someone from NLI be the cohort coach, right? For lack of a better term there, in which we can actually get in there, engage the learners to understand the insights, to have them elaborate, to understand the practicality of where people might be using the concepts and kind of build on that. Sometimes participants ask about the science and we're there to help them, right? So we're starting to see that more. And that's one of the things AI might take away, right? Because you can just ask a bot this and you're now kind of socializing with a bot. But one of the things that we found is you have an actual human in there engaging with the learners in the platform to kind of help them embed the knowledge, embed the skills that they're learning. But absolutely, e-learning, it's not mission critical. There's other great ways, which I mentioned previously, to deliver.
And I'll just jump in there a bit and say a little bit of recent research around AI and using AI. And some of you may have seen this, and maybe someone can find this article. I don't have it on hand, but the use of AI tools often in the workplace can lead to a feeling of loneliness. So I would say what we've learned about social learning in the latest research in social learning, and we've implemented in some of our recent ways of learning, our habit activation platform, is the regular engagement with individuals, which is kind of like an amped up version of like your typical e-learning platform, is the regular engagement with your learners and your instructors at the same time as you're learning in the flow of work. But so it's not just that you're interacting with an AI bot, which could give you answers, absolutely, and might even have like a personalized, feel to it, but you're also learning from each other, and that we know enhances the overall experience. So you're able to jump in when you want, which taps into the feeling of autonomy. You're able to have the sense of relatedness with your cohort. And you're engaging all of those things, tapping into the Aegis model as well. So all of those things are incorporated, and I think that you get those with all of our other ways of learning as well, with the live sessions where you're interacting with your class and with your instructor. And so all of those things we kind of make sure to incorporate in different amounts and in ways that are easy for anyone that we're working with to do. So if you have 5 minutes, then you have 5 minutes, or maybe you can only log in at night. So we make sure to design that depending on who we're actually trying to get the information across to. Well, I guess I'd want to just like switch gears just a little bit and bring it back to Drew for kind of our like the proof of principle, right? So we don't just do the work necessarily, but we actually measure how well the work is done. So our impact, we like to call it. So can you just talk a little bit about like what we do? This is kind of at the back end of all of our work.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what we term as the ROI, right? So just understanding this is the crux of everything we do here. NLI revolves around behavior change. So not just the upfront work, not just the upfront, e-learning or facilitate events. This is understanding what people are doing differently. So the first and foremost thing, and at the very beginning of the implementation phase, when we meet with our clients for the first time, we always start with their business objectives, right? What are we looking to do differently? And what are we looking to achieve through the Grow program or the Connect program or a custom program, right? So we really, really want to understand what's driving this program and how it's going to fit in. And then from there, we look to understand the participant experience once they go through this, right? And we do this through surveying. In terms of the surveying, and we call this the behavior change assessment, we capture program NPS, which is Net Promoter Score. It's an industry standard. We don't over-index on that, but we do capture that because we want to really understand how valuable participants think the program is. But what we really want to understand is the behavior change element. So we measure preparedness. So whether or not the concepts or the skills from the program are becoming easier and natural and automatic for them to use in their day-to-day. We look at retention, whether or not participants retained and can recall the domains of the SCARF model or the SEEDS model, or just the very basic habits of the program. We look at frequency, which is super important. We want to know, are the new behaviors or are the new skills being used? Where are they being used? Is this where we want people to be using it, right? So when you bucket all these things together, it really shows us what the crux of it all, which is the behavior change. Are people doing differently? And is this pathway, or is this program, or is this learning event creating positive behavior change? Are we seeing the habit formation? For example, I had a recent client very recently. They just went through Decide. I feel like I'm plugging Decide a lot on this session today. But one of their main goals was for participants to understand bias and to call it out real time in meetings with their colleagues. So what we did was we measured the participants of the program who self-reported about 3 weeks post-session end. It gives them an opportunity to kind of integrate the techniques and the labeling of unconscious bias into their day-to-day as a leader. So we give them a bit time once the learning ends to go ahead and apply that. And 75% reported that they called out bias in a team meeting over 1 to 3 times over the past week. Now, what they didn't know was we were also surveying their direct reports as well. And the direct reports of those participants, only 47% of them reported that their managers actually called out the bias when they heard that happen in the meeting. So you're looking at a 30% swing. A lot of times we inform the participants, it's best practice to inform the participants like, hey, we're going to measure your direct reports too. So make sure you're taking this very, very seriously, right? It's called positive status pressure. But what we ended up doing was we did find out that there was a pretty big discrepancy in what people are self-reporting, as well as what their direct reports are telling them is happening in one-on-ones or in team meetings. But these are the types of things we identify, we look at, we see the behavior change, and then we try to bring that 30% up. And we worked very hard on getting more of an informational campaign back out to the managers who went through the program. We worked at stronger sustainment. We looked at in-person or live facilitate sessions to kind of help embed the habits and a little bit more so that we can eventually see those numbers tick up. But that's just one of the ways in which we measure. There's multiple ways in which we can do that we could probably build another Your Brain at Work across this. But it's a very, very fun concept, and it really shows us measurable results that we can then tie back to the business objectives and show and report out the ROI for our clients.
We're getting some great questions. So some of the questions that have come through to us have been like, is there a way we can learn more about this, about impact measurement, kind of the science of learning? We do often partner with HR teams, L&D teams, all types of teams to give them research briefings on the science of learning. And that includes a component around measurement where you all can pick our brains or pick the brain of a wonderful scientist on our team and a behavior change expert. And so if any of you are interested in learning more about those learning briefings or the science of measurement and having somebody from our team talk to you, just put ages in the chat and somebody will reach out to you and get you the information you need.
Amazing. Yeah. And, I guess, we have about 10 minutes left. I'd love to get to one thing that I think everyone wants to know. So we've talked about what the experience is like and how we measure it. But if we were looking, or if anyone was looking to do this on their own, what would be the common misconceptions you see in others as you're talking to them? Oh, we've tried this, this, and this, and we did it this way. What would kind of like ping in your brain as, oh, well, this was what you did wrong, or you had this misconception?
There are a couple that come to mind for me. I think one misconception that maybe I'll start with, this is my favorite one. This is my personal favorite. This is the one that I think I go to first all the time. But there's this misconception that coherence of messaging or really clear messaging around your training initiative, around your L&D efforts are it only needs to be okay. And that the coherence of like tying it to other organizational priorities, business priorities, your strategy, it's like it can be done in a little line or a sentence somewhere, hidden somewhere in an email, and that's good enough. And one of the things that I would advise to every single one of you is that actual coherence between what your organizational priorities are and the why or the intended outcomes of your training or your L&D efforts. If you position that correctly, people can actually feel lighter. They can remember more. They can take in more information if you focus on coherence. And And that's something we do a lot of when we do our learning audits or when we do our kind of consultative work with clients, looking at all of their learning curriculum and how they're rolling things out. And that's another thing, if you want more information on the learning audits, you can put learning audit in the chat and somebody will reach out to you on how we partner with folks to do kind of a full kind of end-to-end assessment of what your L&D efforts are, your curriculum. It covers a whole bunch of things. But essentially, like what I tell folks is, if when you design things coherently, there is this umbrella concept that all of these different actions, initiatives, activities get nestled under. And we see this as best practice with some of the most innovative organizations in the world. Microsoft, an example, their big concept was, we want to become a company of learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls, right? They really wanted that growth mindset to be the first thing they did. And so for them, coherence looked like aligning everything in some way or another to becoming an organization of learn-it-alls. So whether it was a performance management transformation, whether it was compliance-based training or some type of regulatory training, whether it was improving ways of working on teams, that is what coherence looks like. It is the harmony of ideas where ideas build upon each other and strengthen each other instead of, yeah, well, we have this and we have that and we have this and we have that and we have this. And yeah, they're kind of tied together, but really like coherence, that umbrella concept that you nestle things under helps people remember more, make more sense of things. And it just will improve everything overall. So you can see I'm passionate about it. Drew, I wonder what your misconception is.
Rachel, how many times have we worked with clients where they just want to do everything under the sun all at once and all together, right? So that's kind of where this coherence thing is playing. And this is one of the biggest things for all of you here. One of the biggest mistakes that we see our clients try to make. We advise them against doing this, of course, but is not being essential and being exhaustive, right? So what we want to do is not focus on everything all at once. We want to focus solely on the most critical and relevant elements versus covering every single detail. So easily recallable information that's super clear, very, very high clarity amounts. We want to limit the amount of time we spend on a concepts because we just want limited amounts of focus. Our brains can only hold so much information. So we want to make sure that the key elements are digestible and most importantly, actionable, as I said, and just make sure that anything else that gets funneled in or that's built to kind of match ties directly back and is super relevant to the objective or the goal that you have at hand, right? Our core focus is on rapidly disseminating small manageable pieces of information, in which case in NLI's world, those are new habits. And this is where we consistently see behavior change at scale. So just focus on the essential, not the exhaustive. One size fits all, we discussed previously. There is no magic bullet, right? So in the terms and kind of recalling back to the modalities, like if you're looking at scalable digital learning, right? Hey, this might work very well for an office environment, which might be 45% of the organization, but this sometimes does not play on a manufacturing floor that might be an additional 35% of the participants, where participants may or may not have access to PCs or to iPads, right? So you really want to make sure that you're evaluating and taking every single learner into mind when you're building out your learning initiative. And then I guess finally, I spoke about this a few years ago at the NLI Summit, which is coming up in October. If you want information, drop Summit into the chat there. But one of the things we talked about was a top-down approach in which maybe the executive team would just funnel down a directive for the rest of the organization to follow, whether that's learning or something else, right? So in general, top-down can be very good if you're working with a very, very small group, or maybe you have a very strong leader-led culture. We've seen a lot of these, and that's great, and we have seen some success, right? But learning initiatives do not have to be top-down because it limits the autonomy of participants, can lead to decreased motivation, it can lead to low engagement because individuals feel they have very, very little control over their own development, right? So it kind of gets into the autonomy and scarf domain that we discussed previously. I think we've all had a negative reaction to probably someone more senior than us telling us what to do, as opposed to maybe asking for some input at the front end. So what really, really works instead is don't mandate directly from the top. We can use stakeholders to be involved and to kind of help push the initiative along. But we've actually seen great success in training managers and equipping them to go out and train their teams in the way that works best for them, right? So it's like, here's what we want to accomplish, ABC, within the next 6 months. Managers, here's some tools, use your own autonomy and figure out the best way to help support your teams through this transition, through this learning initiative, right? So in and understanding the learning at hand, they can then expand it out to learners at every single level. It creates an everyone to everyone type dynamic so that the same concepts, the same techniques, the same content is resonating throughout the organization. And this is what we call a common language, and it allows people to speak their own language, which is essentially a win-win for all. So I think those are my top 3 misconceptions that I normally see, Emma and Rachel.
I love that, because I think we do that. Many organizations, we're all familiar with the idea of like the goals cascade, but there's this inherent push sometimes for like a skills cascade. Like we'll teach folks here, and then somehow it'll reach every level in the organization. And I do like, if you can push that everyone to everyone, more of the social context, the essential bites of learning and habits where people are helping each other, and it can be super effective.
Yeah. And most importantly, you need to make sure those skills are super relevant to everyone, right?
Yeah.
If you're your accounting skill set might not be relevant to someone who's in marketing. So you really need to keep this in mind. And Rachel, that's one of the great things that you and your team do when building out and consulting amongst our top clients.
Yeah, well, we're almost at the end, but I did want to just bring up one question that Daisy had about the how do you make sure to kind of ease the fear of someone who thinks they just can't learn something or even unlearn something? Because a lot of times we're trying to kind of change behavior from something we don't want to see.
Yeah. I think it's a really great question, Daisy. I saw it as it came up and I was like, oh, that's a good one. And I would say growth mindset can be one of the most powerful tools that you can use. So a couple of things, there are lots of studies where they give the same exam to groups of students. And for one group of students, or participants, they'll tell them, this is a measure of your intelligence. The point of this, like, we want you to do really well, and we're going to see how smart you are, how good your skill set is based on this test or exam. To the other group of students, they say, this is going to be a hard test. And that's kind of the point, is to give you difficult material, to have you work through it, do your best. It's going to be challenging. And the people that get that messaging, this is going to be hard and it's going to be challenging, the point is for you to keep working through it. Score better. So the exact same test, same material, using your language to help people understand before they even get into the classroom, before they log into a platform, that the point of something is to help them get better, increase, accelerate, boost their exposure. All of that language that's not just about mastery or, just like you know it or you don't know it can help you. I think that any messaging where you are saying, we are working towards, back to that coherence, we're working on becoming an organization that has more accountability. You, even in accounting, learning some of these terms about digital transformation will be useful to you. The point of this is to expose you. The point of this learning is to give you something new that you may not have experienced. It may be a little difficult at times. That's okay. we want you to learn this. We want you to see it. We want you to experience it. And we're going to support you along the way. Just like those verbiage changes and infusing growth mindset into your messaging, or the first couple of moments of any training experience or learning experience, can go a long way.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I mean, a lot of times you see that fear, you just there's other comments in here just about resistance to learning. One more thing, right? So a lot of times we've seen very strong role modeling from senior leaders. Becton Dickinson, which is a client of ours, and their CEO came on one of our sessions and just talked about the importance of growth mindset. Microsoft, the know-it-alls to learn-it-alls, right? This is the type of thing that exhibiting and leveraging a growth mindset can really help solve. And we found that to kind of unlock potential in some folks that don't necessarily feel there's different things to learn. And then honestly, just the acknowledgement if you see that shift in certain skeptics and you're able to turn a skeptic into an advocate, it's one of the most powerful things you can do for a learning initiative or any initiative for that matter. So those are just some kind of things we always think about when working with some of the more skeptical folks.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks, Drew. Actually, one of the things that's coming up for me about growth mindset and just changing that is that it's actually so easy. It can be as simple as just adding a few words or having a simple statement, and it can happen very quickly. I mean, you can just change someone's mindset in a matter of minutes for this learning experience. So it's not a big challenge. And I know we're coming close to the end. This was an incredibly informational session. I think people got a lot out of it. I know that, if anyone here wants to, learn more, talk to these experts, just place in the chat pathways and where you're from, and someone will reach out to you, and you can talk to Rachel or talk to Drew or any of their teams. Is there anything else that either of you want to, say before we pass back over to Shelby?
I see some familiar faces in the chat, some clients we've worked with. I just want to thank the participants for joining today and for such great dialogue going in the chat. These questions come up and they really inform what we do here in terms of how we work with our clients and how we meet the learners and how we meet participants to really understand how we can just be better humans and do things differently in terms of behavior change. So thank you all for joining the session today. And thank you, Emma and Rachel, for joining as well.
Yeah, likewise. Big thank you. I know you all are doing a lot of work to help people learn and have better experiences at work.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel and Drew. And I will pass it back over to Shelby. Thanks all for showing up today.
Awesome. Thank you all so much again. We appreciate your time and the information that you shared. A few more things before we close out. I know we're a little close to time. So we're going to put up a poll. Let us know how NLI can help you. And as Drew mentioned, Summit 2024 is underway. We're going fully virtual, and it's going to be on October 29th and 30th. So make sure that you take advantage of our early bird special, which is still going right now. Visit summit.neuroleadership.com for all your needs, all of the information, and everything that you need to know. For Insider Exchange, this is specifically for senior executives. If you enjoy your Brain at Work Live, we think you'll really love this program. It's an exclusive opportunity to have a roundtable with our internal leaders to learn more about new innovations at hand. So if you're interested in that, we'll send the link as well. And lastly, we want to partner with our community. So if you are interested in hosting an event with NLI and collaborating with us, please keep an eye out for that, and also just check in on our page. We'll make sure to get information to you as well in our follow-up. And if you enjoy listening to the webinar, then you'll love the podcast. It is Your Brain at Work, wherever you listen to podcasts. And for listeners out there, if you do listen and you want a summit ticket, you can use your Brain at Work 24 to get 10% off. So make sure you take advantage of that. And this is where we say farewell. So on behalf of our team behind the scenes and everyone else, we appreciate you. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you same time next week.